thing is, though, right? You've just developed a list of endless things, and that's not the hard part. Coming up with that list and ideas is usually never the challenge. If you are an entrepreneur, your brain is buzzing with ideas. Your brain is buzzing with things that you could do. So really the crux of it becomes this, right? How do we prioritize? You cannot do everything at once. And if you try, you will probably fail. I hate to say that. I mean, there are some people out there who are really, really good at doing a million things. I'm not one of them. And I suspect that most people aren't. So this question of prioritization, this is where, as I mentioned at the beginning, most of the people, when I do mentoring sessions and I talk to other mentors, this is where a lot of people really fall down. They either have not done that focus in the beginning around who they're going after and what they want to achieve, or they get here and they have this amazing list of things that they can do, and they're trying to do all of them because they don't want to give up an opportunity, because you say, well, I've got to try everything. I've got to fish in every pond. I can't say no to anything because I'm in the early stages of my business and all of that. And you don't want to say no. And I get that. I struggle with it too. And I'm not always perfect at this, let me tell you. But you will not do a great job. So what I encourage you is you ask yourself essentially 3 big questions. When a new opportunity comes in, or when there's something on your list, which is the first one, is go back to that vision and goals. I mean, I hang mine literally on the wall. Does that thing that come in, is that going to get me closer to my vision and goals? And very often the answer will be yes, because the vision might be big, but if the vision is pretty specific, it can also narrow you down. So for example, a business that I was recently talking to, they said to me, initially, their goal was to kind of just grow. They came and they said, my vision is to be the #1 supplier of X, what the product that they sell, in my town by the end of this year. And then, or not even their town, in sort of their region. They didn't even say that. They're just generally #1. They then focused their goal down and they said, actually, what I really want is to get, I really want to focus on the retail side of this business. And I want to get listings in shops. I'm not going to worry for now about the direct to consumer side, which that may not be the right strategy, et cetera, but that was the decision that was made. So when new things were coming into play, that were coming to them, opportunities to do other things, it was quite easy for them to say, do you know what? No, this is all about getting distribution in retail. This is not moving me toward that vision, these goals. I'm going to say no to that for now. I'm going to put it on my list because maybe in 12 months or 6 months, we might change our mind. But for now, it's not getting there. The other thing I think you think about is when you do that exercise of all the things that you can come up with, you will find, I think usually, that they fall into the things that you can do and the ways that you can grow your business usually fall into one of 4 buckets. It can be about reach, growing more getting more customers to try your product and getting more customers to use your product. It can be about engagement, which is about getting your existing customers to do more. It can be about expansion, which is going into whole new areas and solving a whole new customer problem. Or it can be about value, which is getting more out of each transaction. So either charging more or working efficiently. Usually, I find that if you are trying to do all 4 of these at once, you are not going to be focused. If you're trying to kind of open up new channels, I'm going to go international and I'm going to do this and I'm going to try to get customers out of here. Oh, and by the way, we're going to premiumize at the same time. And it's going to be really tough because you're just going to be running in too many directions, particularly if you have a very small team or if your team is just 1 person. So think about, and again, this goes back to your vision, but often I bring it up here because it usually comes out when you're actually getting to the what you're actually going to do. So you may say your vision is to, grow a consumer brand. And then it's like, okay, well, wait a minute, I'm going to go off and do all these Google ads to get new customers, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. So think about, how do you focus? Now, it doesn't mean forever, because of course you have to do all 4 of these over the period of having a lifetime business, but maybe it's something around, for the next 6 months, we are going to focus exclusively on engagement. We are going to make sure that the customers that we have right now, we get the most out of them and they stay and they retain, et cetera, because we can bring in more customers but then we just have what I call a leaky bucket, which means you're bringing in new ones and they're just dropping right back out. They're dropping right back out. So let's fix that problem. So Eric's got a question. Can two of these objectives work together? Reach and value? Absolutely. So they can work together. I don't think you have to pick just one, but I think if you try to do all four, you will, it will mean you're running in too many directions. So yes, for example, reach, if you say the best way that we can get more of our customers to try is to say, actually, we are going to position ourselves as a premium brand, for example. That's one way to do those two things together. But if you also say, we're going to be at the same time, we're going to position a premium brand over here, then we're going to try to do a low cost brand over here for this audience, which is expansion because you're offering a new and solving a new problem. You just are going to kind of get it there. So just ask yourself this question around which of these objectives are you actually trying to reach? And I know I'm covering a lot of things here, so we can go deeper into any of these in one-to-one sessions. These are the kind of, any of these could be a standalone question. Okay, and then the third question, and this is probably the one that I ask myself every single day. And this is, when Michael talked about having his 5 things he does each day, this to me is kind of how I make this judgment. Once I know that big long list of all the things I could do, I ask myself, as I said, does it fit with the vision? Is it fitting with the strategies that we want and the objectives that we have? And finally, which one is going to have the biggest impact with the least effort? So the way I do that is with a very simple matrix. And where, again, for me, this is what works for me. Different things will work for different people, but I'm a very visual person. So I literally, my team will know, Alice will know, we've done this exercise as a team on a very regular basis. We literally take each one of the things that we can do and think about how easy is it for us to do? Is it going to cost us a lot of money? Is it going to cost us a lot of time? What does it look like versus what is the impact that it's going to give? And literally plot it into one of these boxes. There are online tools you can use to do this, or you could do it an old-fashioned way by drawing it on a notebook, or you can do it in a Google Doc, or you could do it in Post-its on a wall, whatever works for you. But you physically put the things in each of these boxes, depending on where you are. And it doesn't need to be a massive quantitative effort. It's not like, oh, I'm going to rate this one here, I'm going to rate them. It's your intuition, and which goes back to the word that Michael used earlier in the session around, your intuition of where does this fit? If I do this thing, am I going to get the right impact out of it? And you'll see then the things that are going to be relatively low effort, which is your cost and time, and high impact. Obviously, these are the things that you're going to do first, right? So these are your sort of like no-brainers. I might as well just go off and do that thing. Pops up on your to-do list, just go do it. The things that are higher resource, higher effort, but high impact, this is the tricky balance, right? Because these are the things that you can't possibly do overnight. This might be building a whole new website or launching a new product or whatever that might be that you need to do eventually, but you have to be realistic about what's achievable when. And what I find is often people, they get hung up on these and they don't do some of the ones in green in the bottom because they're so focused on the longer term project. So this is one where, these projects, you need to break them down into smaller chunks, into smaller milestones so that they can show up in the green and therefore are easier to implement and you can do them, because otherwise it'll just be this big thing out there that you're like, okay, well, this is a 2-year project and therefore you never get to it. So those you need to really take the time and think about them, but you need to identify them and recognize that that's what they are. The ones that are on the left-hand side of this matrix, again, kind of a no-brainer, right? But really hard to decide that something isn't important. Really hard to say that something is not doable. And we're going to say no to that. So, if it's low impact, low impact, and it's but it's not going to take you a lot of time, sometimes you might want to do it, but don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. If you can do it really fast, do it. But if you have to have 3 conversations about whether you're going to do it or not, probably not worth it because it's on the left-hand side. So this to me is an absolutely critical tool that I use constantly, and it just keeps me honest. and I move things around in it. Like, so there will be things that, for example, might originally, and this is probably what you'll find when you use it, you'll have a lot of stuff that is in the bottom corner, because on its own, you think it's relatively easy to do and you think it's high impact. But when you then compare it to everything else, it's all relative, right? You realize compared to those other things, you've got to move it. So if you start out and you've got everything in the bottom right-hand bucket, do this exercise again, and then do it again, and then do it again. And maybe do this once a month, once a week, however often you need to do it to keep yourself honest. So, you know, you could do this in bigger, long-term strategy, but you can also do it in day-to-day prioritization. Cool. So what I would say when you do that exercise is the things that are on the left-hand side that you've decided not to do, be very clear that you've decided not to do them. Write down, I mean, I literally, in our strategic plan, I literally have a thing that says, we will not do these things. So that when they pop back up and someone asks you why you haven't done them, you say, I made a conscious choice not to do them. Now, that doesn't mean in 12 months, you can't reevaluate them and do them. They don't go away forever. It just means for right now, so that we can do all these other things, you don't do them. I would encourage you to strongly to write it down, because they will pop up. The other thing that will happen is what I call the shiny new objects. So this will be something new that just pops up. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Like, for example, Threads, right? The new thing from Meta. Not saying you shouldn't do it, just saying don't assume that you suddenly need to go run off and do that because it's shiny and it's new and it's out there. You have to go back and say, before I spend time on that, does it fit with my strategy? Is it going to help? What is the impact? What is the effort? Because every new thing you take on is going to AI. Exactly. Perfect. Everybody said, oh my God, I have to use ChatGPT. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And it's like, well, you've just gone completely off of where you were. So write down what these things are. And when a shiny new thing comes up, use that grid, use these questions to ask yourself, do I need to worry about that right now? Don't say not forever. So add it to that big long list of things you could do. Just don't include it to your will do in this time period. So Steve has asked, with this tool, you're talking overall business strategies as increased sales, web build, or project-based, such as topics for social media marketing. Honestly, I think you can use it at whatever level you need to think about. So I use this when I do big long-term strategy, which is where I started. I feel like you have to have that in order to use this effectively, but you can also use it on the tiniest, within a project itself. You know, you could say, we're doing this project. I'll give you an example. We were in our own team at Digital Boost, we were thinking about building a new feature for all of you on our website, right? And there were many, many things that we could add to this feature. We could say, oh, we could have them do this, we could have them do this, we could have them do this. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute. If we try to do all of those things, it's going to take us a year to create this thing. So let's take each one of those features and put it against this grid and say, which one is going to have the biggest impact? Which are the ones that are like, okay, they're good, but are they really going to make a massive, massive difference? So you could do the same thing for social media marketing. Would this channel, you know, even would this post make that much of a difference? It's all about that question that you're constantly asking in your head. So I think you can use it at both levels. Last thing that I think it's the last thing that I'll say is that exactly should have or must have, I think is another nice way to use. That's another tool that I do use, is the sort of should versus must. It's just another way of thinking about exactly the same thing. The other thing that I will say is thinking about how you can chunk your longer term goals into shorter term milestones. So one of the Digital Boost mentors, this is his example, I'm stealing it completely, but I love it when he talks about it. He talks about the fact that imagine that you are standing on the edge of a lake and there is a little island in the middle of the lake and you want to get there. And that is your goal. That's your vision, right? It's a very clear vision. You know exactly what it is. You want to get to that little island out there. If you got a running start on the edge of the lake and you ran out to that island and jumped, you might make it. You absolutely might make it. But you also might fall flat on your face and drown because you're so overwhelmed. It's such a big leap. You can't necessarily make it. But if you took that and you broke it down into small steps and you put little lily pads or little rocks all the way to get yourself to that island, you might get there a tiny bit slower, but you know what? You'll stay on course and you will get there. And the likelihood of you falling flat on your face is going to be lower. So while it is absolutely important to have a 3-year goal, a 1-year goal, or even a 6-month goal. I think when you're a solo entrepreneur, it's incredibly important to break it down into very small things. Like, what am I going to do in the next 30 days? What am I going to do in the next 60 days? What am I going to do in the next 90 days? I'm going to give you a real example of that, which is just a very practical one that came out of a mentoring session I recently had. I was meeting with a woman and she said, okay, well, she wanted to talk about email marketing. And she said, I want to send a newsletter every week because my goal is I want to grow my sales by this. And I determined that newsletters are that way. And I said, okay, well, how's that going? And she said, to be honest, in the last 6 months, I've sent one. And I said, why is that? And she said, well, I just keep getting pulled in different directions. I know I have this goal to send a weekly one. And I know I have to send a weekly one because I've been told that's best practice. And we said, okay, well, what happened if you sent a monthly one? Is that not better than sending one every 6 months, which is what you're actually doing now? So give yourself a more realistic goal to get there. And we broke it down into a sort of 1 week, 30, 60, 90 day goal, which was that by the end of this week, she was just going to have developed her template, nothing more. She wasn't going to try to do everything because we all try to do everything, right? We were like, I need a new website. I'm going to go build a new website. It's like, no, this week, do nothing more than just try to build a website. And then promise me in the next 30 days, you are going to send one newsletter. And then maybe in the next 60 days, you will have sent 2. So you've at least gotten 2 down and you can test and you can learn, et cetera. And then in the next 90 days or even 6 months, whatever it is for you, you can get yourself into that routine of weekly emails. So start small. And I don't mean to squash your ambition in any way. Big ambition is important, but we can only get to that lake. We can only get to that big ambition if we break it into smaller things, at least if you're like me, who kind of thinks big and then has to break it down into things that go there. So when you think about those things on there, think about whether or not you can actually parcel it down, break it into something that is achievable. And there's no greater satisfaction for me, at least, than checking something off my to-do list. So actually breaking it down into something like, I'm not going to worry about sending a newsletter every single week. This week, all I'm going to worry about is writing my template. Great, I can check that off. So the more you can break it down, the better that can be for you. So that is really all that I had to say, other than the fact that it's about accountability, and it's about knowing where you're going, and you can basically just it's that constant asking yourself, that constant questioning. So I've got a question back to you now that we've gone through all of that. How are you feeling? What do you think you could do differently? What are the biggest actions that you could potentially take away from this session?